Hi, I'm Jadi and I want to talk about something strange about object-oriented programming. Most of us know the syntax, most of us use the syntax, but few of us, or maybe more than a few, I have seen dozens of people asking about this, do not grasp the idea behind object-oriented programming. We do not get why it's useful. We know how to use it. But, let's look. The point is, I'm not a big fan of object-oriented programming neither. And if I have a choice, in many cases, I won't use it because I write small scripts. I don't need it. This is what I think. But I was solving the advent of code 2021. And on day 4, I found myself solving one of the questions using classes, although this is a very small script. But using classes, it was much easier for me to solve it. So I thought maybe it's a good example to show you guys how you should think in objects. First, let's have a look at the question. The main theme of the advent of code 2021 was about, or is about, because you still can go and solve the questions. It's a very nice competition, highly recommended. Was about or is about the submarine. You are in a submarine and you are moving along deep seas and you have to solve different challenges. In one of them, you encounter a giant squid which wants to use your bingo subsystem to play bingo with you. Hopefully you know about the bingo. You have a board like this. Another person has a board like this, or you may have two boards. You have another board like this. And the manager, announcer, announced some random numbers. First, she announced 7. You will go and check, okay, 7. I will mark my 7. The next person will mark her 7. And the next person will mark its 7 because we are playing with squid. Then the announcer will announce 4. You will go and search. Okay, I have a 4. You may not have it. This guy also has it. This is also has a 4. 9. Everyone will mark 9. The game goes on till in one case someone calls bingo. Says bingo! So, oh, really? You say, yes, I have a complete row. Or maybe you have a completed column. And you are the winner. In this advent of code, the question is having a file like this. Get your puzzle input. Like this. It's a huge file. These are the random numbers and these are the boards. The question is, to guarantee victory against the giant squid, figure out which board will win first. This is the question. What will your final score be if you choose that board? And the score is sum of all unmarked numbers multiplied by the number that was just called. Okay. I wanted to solve this. Let's start. This is the input. Later, I want to tell you why sometimes programming in OOP helps you a lot. I will go to 2021. mkdir 2021, cd 2021. Always using Tmux is good when you are in terminal. It will let you split, do whatever you want. Most of the things you want. Okay. Vim input txt. I will create that file first. These are the random numbers which are going to be announced because it's our submarine subsystem. And these are the boards we have. Before going into object-oriented or whatever we want to do, we have to read the input data. I will do it very straightforward. Vim solve py. Okay, to read this first I have to open the file. Open input txt as f and lines equals f read lines. I will read all the lines. Now I have a array. In each element of this array is one of these lines, but it also includes the end line. So let's remove the end line. That would be more fun. I will say lines equals L strip, which will remove the end line, beginning and end spaces or whatever for L in lines. Now it's a little bit nicer. Print lines. It's always good to run your program frequently. Python 3 solve. See, these are the lines. For example, this is the last line in this file. So finding the random numbers is ultra easy. Rands is line 0. This is it. Then we will split by a comma. Now we have this. Let me show you. Okay, this is the rands, but as you can see, the numbers are not numbers, they are strings. So let's resolve this. I can to say rands equals, this will run on everything, r in rands. What I want? Int of r. I can do this with map too, but I prefer to do it step by step. Okay, now I have an array with all the random numbers. Now I need to find out about the boards. Let's go to the other side. See how many lines do we have. We have 601 lines. This is one line. Sorry, what happened? This is the first line. Then each board occupies 6 lines. 1 empty line and 5 data lines. Okay, so we had 601. This is the one, so we have 600 divided in this. So we have 100 boards. What I can do is I can create a for So I have the rands. I can do for I in range of 100. For each board, I have to find the board data. Practically, I have to find this. I have to find this. I have to find this. Please remember that we are starting from 1 here. We had to start from the 0 would be nicer. 0, 1, 2, 3, and this would be 8. So to find the first line of the second table, what should I do? Okay, I always have one extra line here. I have to omit 6 lines. Then I have to omit 1 line. So 1 and 1 is 2. Omit 2 lines and start from 6 multiplied by I. You can, this will, so 6 will give you the start of the ith table. Okay? So let's go for that. Sorry if this part is a little bit ugly, but it will help you to understand why object-oriented is nice sometimes. I'll say, okay, I want to create a new board. This board equals np0s55. np is a very well-known name for the import numpy as np. This is, most people do this. They import numpy library, use it as np to make it easier. And I say, okay, give me a matrix 5 in 5, fill it with zeros. Then I will start reading the lines. This line equals what? Lines I multiplied by 6 plus 2. I can say j plus 2 and add the j here. For I in, for j in range, bear with me, 5. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying for each table 100 times find each line. So the third line of the 20th table will be 20 multiplied by 6 plus the third line, 3 plus 2. This will be the line in this file which points to the 20th table, third line. So I have this line. Then I will say, okay, this line equals what? I can from R is sub, I'm looking at this. I will replace every how many space we have with one space, and then I will split based on spaces. So I will have all the numbers. Same thing I did with the rand. I will say substitute whatever space you have. This means one space or more with one space on this line. Then strip it, then split based on space. This will give me 94, 33, 3, 78, 32. But again, like numbers in strings, I have to convert this later. Let's do this to make it nicer. So at the end, I will have this line, or I can go with this board to make it easier. J equals int I for I in this line. I have created row J. Okay. Here, after doing this for 5 times, I will have all the data for this board. Now, our main part, which I wanted to talk about, why OOP will help you, starts. I created the rands. I have found out these one by one. But where should I store them? If you were a general C programmer, you would create a huge matrix of numbers in matrices. So you would have a matrix of matrices, list of lists, to create a list of 2-dimensional matrices. That would be a little bit complicated, at least for my brain. A guru programmer have talked and said that object-oriented programming is good because it lets companies develop their program using Medicore programmers. Now it's getting complicated here. You saw, even separating the boards were kind of complicated. What happens if we want to check these random numbers, check them here, and mark them, see if the board is winning? It will make these matrices more complicated. Now, OOP helps us. General idea behind OOP, by the way, it started 90s. Now it started from 60s, 1960s. We have Simula, then we have Smalltalk. But during 90s, it flourished with C++, Java, and everything being the main programming language for huge companies. The idea behind OOP is combining data with code and call them objects. See, if we wanted to do this with the general C programming or traditional C programming, these would be the data. We have to save them in a huge data and then run code over them. OOP says, don't do this. OOP says, I will create an object for you, which is the combination of the data and the code. For example, if you have a lamp and you want to model it in OOP, you would say, okay, this is the wattage of this lamp. This was the price of this lamp. This is the status of this lamp, if this is on or off or burned. And these are the codes you can run on this lamp. For example, you can say, turn on, turn off, change status, get wattage, change the lamp, or whatever. See? And call this the lamp object. Then when you want to define a lamp, you can say L1 is a lamp. And then you can say L1 on, turns this on. L1 change will change the lamp. Same thing happens here. We want to create a bingo board. So we can say we have an object which is a board. It has some data in it. We can call it data. This is the data inside it. It can have a marked. It's another matrix near this matrix filled with zeros in the beginning and says, okay, nothing is marked. If you mark this, we will change this to 1. If you mark this, we will change this to 1. If the announcer called 82 and I have an 82, for example here, I will change this to 1. So I will know what is marked here. You can have different solutions, but I decided with this one. Sorry, I lost it. You can have a board. It's an object. So we have data, which is called attributes or properties of this object. We had data, which was this. And we have marked, which was a matrix showing what is marked. And we can have some methods or functions or codes working on these. Our methods can be win, if this board is a winner. So if I want to do this, I have to check if everything is 1 in one of the rows or columns. Mark, which mark one number. Say, okay, on this board, for example, I say B, mark 85. And it will search if there is an 85 here, it will change this to 1. And score, which returns back the score of a board. I can separate myself completely from this logic or how this is working, where should I store them, and just define my classes. So I have to import RE here because I have used it here. I will say we have a class which is called board. Let's define it. How you define objects, how you use them, everything is dependent on your programming language. Here I'm not teaching the object-oriented programming in Python. I just want to show the people who know about the syntax how to use them. You have to define your functions here. There is one important function in C, in Python we call it def, which is called the constructor. Whenever, remember the lamp example? Lamp had some data like what and had some methods. Whenever you want to define a lamp, make an instance of this class. You say L1 equals lamp. This will call this constructor function. I can say, okay, I need some data here. So this will accept some data and say 20. This means this is a 20 watt lamp. So I can change my parameters here. Also, you saw this self. In Python syntax, every time you define a function, you define a method in the function, you pass self to it. And self will point to the instance, specific instance of this object. You will see this a little bit later. Even here, I say, okay, if someone created a board, call this function with this data. And then you can say self, I need this instance to have a variable or properties and make it equal to data. Self marked, create a property or variable inside this object and call it from numpy 0s55. Whenever you create one, this will be created. Then you have different methods. For example, mark, always self. Then you say, okay, this number, mark this number. You go through the whole data for I in range 5, for j in range 5. if self, so it points to this instance's data, self data equals number, change the self marked I and j to 1. This is marked. So I just wrote another function, method. Def win. If this board is a winner, you always need self because you want to use these variables. If you don't use this self, the variable will belong to the whole class. But I want it to belong to this specific instance. If the board is win, for I in range 5, what to do? For each of these, check the whole column. So I would say for j in range 5, if self data I and j is 0, if it's not marked yet, 1 is false. I can define a 1 here and say 1 is true. So each row start here and say, okay, I assume I have 1. Check everything on the marked. If any of them is 0, I have not 1. Okay. But what happens if I have 1? Say, if 1 return true. If I have 1, say, okay, 1. If nothing happened here and I'm still continuing my function, I will say for j in range of 5, check the rows. 1 is true, same logic. For I in range of 5, if self marked I and j is 0, I have not 1. 1 is false. And if 1 return true, if you reached here, it means you have not 1. Return false. And I'm just defining a class of bingo. So I created a class. I said, okay, this is my properties of each instance. It has data and it has marked. Data is this, marked is the other function, other matrix. Now I defined some methods. Mark will get a number and mark it here. We'll check here, and if sees it, change this to 1. I defined the 1. I have to define the score. Def score gets self and a number, because the score in this question was whatever which is not marked. If the board is winning, add all of these and multiply them in the last number called. So it gets the called and say, okay, score is 0 for I in range 5, for j in range 5, and say if self marked I and j is 0, if it's not marked, what to do? Score add to score self data I and j should be okay. And when you have done all of this, return score multiplied in called number. Okay. See, when I was creating my class, I have not bothered about my input, my lines, how this works, what should I do, what the squid does, where the submarine is, who is the leader, and everything. What I did was I was just thinking about my class as a medical programmer. I've said, okay, I have a class of board. It's initialized like this. Mark does this, checks everything if it's in mark. Win has this logic. And score has this logic. Now I have my classes. So how to use them? Here I was creating the board, if you remember. Here I was creating the board, and here I had my board ready to be used. I can just say, I can create a variable, an array of boards, and say boards append an object of the type board with the data this board. This board was a matrix like this. So I will say create, call the init function of the board class with this data. So it will create a new class here, new instance of a class, add it to the boards. If you want, we can do something. Let's remove this print. I can do print when everything is done. I can say print boards 0. Print the first board. I will close this. Now I can say Python 3 solve. Board takes no argument. How come? What is this diff? Sorry, what happened? Okay, the init function gets 2 arguments. Okay, the first thing in this list is a object of board. I can even directly call the win here and check if board 0 wins. For sure it's not, because the game just started. True. So I have another bug in my function. We will go and check the win. This is good. You always have to run frequently your code and see if it works or not. 1 is true if self is 0, 1 is false. Ow, return false. Looks okay to me. For I in range 5, we assume we have 1, and we say for each j, if self data self marked, you're checking marked, if marked is 0. Okay. I'm keeping all of this in the code, so you will see that. Marked. Okay, these are not good errors, but I will keep them. So you will see that when you are programming, you will see errors. You have to debug, you have to check errors. For example, here I saw, okay, board object has no attribute, mockred. So this was typed wrong. If you saw someone just programming from the first to the end, you will know that they are just have memorized it, or they are a guru. Anyway, let's see. But it's very normal, and you should be brave when seeing errors. Read directly the error, test your program. We always say a huge program which works correctly used to be a small program which used to work correctly. So it was very nice that we tried this and saw our problem. Okay, now I have the logic of board. I have the board class, its methods, and its data. And I have created an array of all the boards. Now what? Now it becomes very easy. Practically, I have just started writing the main part of this program. For R in rands, for each random number, what should I do? Okay, in all the boards, for board in boards, try all the boards one by one. This board, mark R. Okay, mark R on in this board. If board win print board score, and I have to send it the R. And if it's done, exit. Let's see if it works. Okay, it says the truth value of an array if self data is num. More than one. On the win, it is not working. Let's go and check the win. Win gets the self. Let's see which line. It happens on live 12. Ow. That's why object-oriented programming is good for medical programming. You saw the problem, right? I just said if self-data. It's self-data I and j equals to now. Okay, once more. And this is the correct answer. It's good that you saw that we always do wrong things, we mistype things, we search, and everything. It says, okay, the correct answer for the first winning board is 2745. And in the question, I have said the same things. Yes, for the first time, I said, first part, I have said 2745. What I wanted to show you was how object-oriented programming made our main logic very simple and understandable. You could do the same thing with a functional programming, with a procedural programming, whatever method you were using. You can always write good programs, but not sure if you, yes, for sure you can, even with assembly. But this is how object-oriented programming helps you. If they fire you just today and hire a new intern for free, or even get them, ask them for money to working in this family, and tell them, for example, the win logic has changed and now we are accepting these as a winner if someone had marked all of these diagonals. Okay, not even he or she or it doesn't need to understand the new logic. They just go to your program. This is the main logic. Okay, board win. So they just go to the proper class of the board and check the method win. Say, okay, win works like this. And just add another couple of fors there and we'll check for these and the program will work fine. Practically, they are abstracting the win from the other parts of the logic. Your method of win is used as a abstracted function. You just call if it's win. Yes, it does. You can do the same thing in procedural, but this is in general makes programming more clear. For me, writing this was much easier than doing this in a whole another paradigms. Anyway, I just wanted to show you this, why sometimes it makes life easier if you think in object-oriented programming. I'm not a big fan, but practically you should not be fan of things. You should learn different things. When you want to work on a project, for example, okay, I'm not a big fan of object-oriented programming, but I want to work and contribute to Bitcoin, and it's written in object-oriented programming, so I will use it. Or I had lots of reasons to join my current company. They were writing in Python. I would prefer if they were doing in Haskell or Erlang or C, because those were cooler. But okay, they're working with Python, and I will work with Python. No issues there. Don't be fan of things. Think for yourself and choose for yourself. I was Jody. Hope you enjoyed. I will be glad if you subscribe and tell your friends and do whatever you can in the world to enjoy your life.